Hey, Baba Eli here. Tonight's focus will be sexual abuse and the trauma that comes afterwards. Did you know that 1 out of 6 black girls are sexually abused on college campuses? And I need you to focus in on this panel as they teach on protecting your youth as well as ourselves. Now, I need you to subscribe, as doing so broadens our ability to reach wider audiences. Your comments let us know your thoughts. Your lights make us stronger. Once again, please subscribe.
I am Orlando Scott. I am the pastor of Amplified Christian Church here in Snellville, Georgia. And I am here with 2 friends of mine, and we are going to talk about sexual trauma and the church. We want to talk about history, resource strategies for our nonprofit spaces to understand trauma and sexual trauma in particular, and have some expert folks come and talk about this from an informed perspective. So I'm going to start with my sister. I want you to introduce yourself, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Hello, my name is Tashika Folks, Ty for short. I am a psychotherapist here in the Metro Atlanta area. I offer a vast variety of therapeutic options and alternatives. I do a lot of community outreach and have a practice over on Chamblee Tucker Road. And that's essentially who I am.
What's the address of the?
Oh, the address is 2900 Chamblee Tucker Road, Atlanta.
And how can they contact you?
And the practice is MBR Counseling. And I have a website. You can just type that in and I will pop right up. That's essentially how people find me too.
And she has, I'm going to put it back out there, Wellness Wednesdays on Facebook. She has some material out there, very informative. And I've been watching Ty over COVID, and it has been inspiring.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And my brother.
Yes, I am retired detective, SVU detective Kevin McNeil. I was with the Cobb County Police Department investigating child abuse crimes, human trafficking, domestic abuse, elderly abuse. I'm retired now. However, I started my own company called the 12 Project, in which I travel around the world and educate organizations, athletic organizations, churches, nonprofits about trauma and abuse. That's what I do now. Authored 5 books doing the same thing. So that's what I do now. That's my passion.
And how do they get in contact with you?
They can go on my website, www.the12project.com.
The12project.com.
Yes.
And that's
12 is spelled out.
Yeah, 12 is spelled out.
Yes,
right?
spelled out.
.com.
Yeah.
And so our conversation today is about trauma.
Yeah.
And I'm going to kind of bounce back between the two of you and talk or get your perspective on trauma. We've been seeing, and I got to do this, in the public spaces, in the news, we have found these sexual assault cases coming up on our entertainers.
Mm-hmm.
And some historic sexual assault trauma, particularly with our hip hop individuals. But I want to talk particularly again from how will we handle this in the church. But Kevin, give us a history of trauma from your perspective, history of trauma, and we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, typically when we deal with trauma, particularly sexual trauma, we want to start when it happens, particularly when it starts with someone either in the church or a celebrity. We want to go, oh, now it's time to deal with it. But trauma, sexual trauma has been happening for years. Like human trafficking has been happening. Like human trafficking is not new. You go back to the slave trade, America has been trafficking humans. Like this is nothing new. Like, in the slave trade, they were sexual abusing slaves. And so when we start dealing with sexual trauma, we can't start now. It's been happening. So we got to start talking about how do we deal with trauma from a historical perspective. Alex Miller said something that was really, really interesting. Alex Miller said that when one child is abused, a whole generation is affected. That's significant because when you abuse one child, that child, if that child doesn't get help, that means that child begins to raise their children, right, without the ability to connect with their child, which means they can't give them the nurture, the love that they need. Yeah, they may raise that child. They may put a roof over that child's head, put food in their mouths, but they may not be able to nurture that child, right? Or they may get in a relationship, but that relationship may be abusive. And that cycle continues to go on. And they may invite somebody in their home that may sexually abuse that child, may physically abuse that child. And so by the time myself, a law enforcement officer, gets involved, this child probably has experienced multiple abuses, not just sexual abuse. They may experience physical abuse. They may observe some type of other sexual abuse. They may experience some type of neglect. And so when we start talking about sexual abuse or we're observing in the news, by the time a woman or a man reports abuse, they probably experienced it for years. Or they probably have multiple cases of abuse. They just now reported it. And by the time they report it, if law enforcement is not trained on it, law enforcement might end up abusing them again. Because if you ever see a police report or you see a state case, it's going to say the state versus the individual who caused the abuse, right? So the state's going to take the witness who's the victim and use them to testify. The state's not going to provide them with counseling, right? The state's not going to provide them with any services, right? They may recommend some, but the state is just saying, okay, that person broke our law, so we're going to punish them to the full extent of the law. We just want you to testify on our behalf, right? So the state is not looking out on behalf of the victim. The state is looking out on the behalf of the law. So don't get it twisted. When the state says protect and serve, it's to protect and serve the state, not the victim, okay? So let's not get it twisted, okay? So the victim has to show up in court on their day off, take time off from work, from their job, right? They have to make way best they can, okay? So we have to understand the replications for sexual trauma and abuse. And so we have to be more than just trauma informed, we have to be victim informed. So when we start talking about the historical perspective, we got to start understanding the Catholic Church, right? We got to understand the church as a whole. How long has this been going on, right? The historical aspect. So when we hear now something hits the news, this isn't the first time, right? And so this has been happening for ages. And how many people have been keeping quiet about it? So, yeah.
Ty, could you, he talked about the history of trauma. Can you give us a basic understanding from the psychological perspective of what trauma is and how does it manifest in us?
So, like, as you spoke before, there are so many forms of trauma. And in the clinical world, we essentially look at trauma in the form of acute or chronic or, these prolonged exposure to trauma. Because acute trauma could be something, a singular event, right? An altercation, a sudden death, unplanned things of that sort. Prolonged trauma is things that go on continuously. It could be environmental. It could be growing up in an area that is distressed. It does not always have to be, like you said, physically inflicted or sexually inflicted. Like, trauma is the response in your mind and in your body that tells you that something was unprompted, that was unwelcome, that was spontaneous, that, unplanned, things of that sort. And it makes an imprint in your brain to give you this response. That's where trauma response kind of comes from, right? So your brain tells you there's a perceived threat and it looks like something I saw before, smells like something I saw before, sounds like something I saw before. And so now you're constantly hypersensitive at times to whatever feels, sounds, smells familiar. It could be a single word. It could be a cologne. It could be a song of a sort, right? Now, we also have more incidents of this compounded trauma. And we call that complex PTSD, CPTSD. And that could be things like, here we are in the middle of this war that is happening. that environment is going to be something to come out of. But not just in the lives, right? Over in the Congo, what are they doing? Right? All these things that are not necessarily aired. And so centuries of this has been happening. Absolutely didn't start the slave trade. Yeah, I mean, and I'm no pastor, but I do know a little bit, right? And so when I have read the Bible and come up in church, you can hear all these stories of I want that, I'll take that, keep going, right? So whatever they excuse it for, whether it was control, whether it was some sense of gain, that's essentially what that feels like. So if someone comes in your house and takes something from you, they took it from you, and you have to suck it up. That's essentially what a lot of victims feel like now. I have to suck it up. But there's so many barriers to reporting trauma because historically, when it's been reported, there's not always a favorable response. So if I reported it to, I don't know, your employer, but it was the other boss who did it, essentially you probably lost your job. Or if I reported it to my mother about her father, but my mother doesn't have the language because she too was assaulted, maybe, or there's a fear because her father's her father, right? Things get pushed, excused, minimized, silenced, ignored, all those things. And so now that everything is on TV and social media, there is so much fear and paranoia about labels, about how people are going to perceive you, your own image, all these things that really contribute to the barriers of reporting trauma. So here we are having these conversations, trying to be proactive in a manner, but this is such long, I mean, this literally runs through our thread.
Yeah.
This is so deep rooted. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So all these responses to trauma, whether it's physical or sexual or war or whatever the case may be, self-inflicted trauma.
Yeah.
We don't even know how to report that.
Yeah, that's true.
So when you say self-inflicted, what does that look like? What is that?
That can look, so that can look like anything from literally cutting yourself. It can look like pulling your hair out in little small pieces that end up in big. We call that trichotillomania. It's a whole disorder, right? It could be something like children. So I also do emergency psych evals at the hospital nearby. And I see people come in for things like, I'm not quite suicidal, but I do want to cause harm to myself, right? I don't want to leave the earth, but I don't want to feel like I just felt this morning. So I choke myself.
Yeah.
So I overeat.
Yeah.
So I consume drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
So I am over-sexualized.
Yeah.
So I participate in new addictions, just finding new things, right? So I'm seeking some sort of a chemical response that gives me some sort of a relief for a temporary feeling.
Yeah.
But my mind and my cognitive sense tells me that that temporary feeling is long.
Yeah.
So let me try to just
Do something.
wrap it real fast, right?
Yeah. And you think about it, who teach children to cry, right? Them little jokers can't stand up when they come out the womb. They can't hold their head up. And I can't answer that question, right? They come out the womb crying, but I can tell you who teach them how to be silent, right? We do. Because if I say one thing, you can finish. If I say one part of a phrase, you can finish the rest of it. If I say keep crying, right, you'll say, I give you something to cry about. If I say what happens in this house, you'll say, right? If I say I brought you into this world, exactly. Kids hear that, right? They take that with them. So then you wonder why when something happens to them, they don't tell you. I always tell parents as a police officer, if your child can't tell you everything, they won't tell you anything. And vice versa, if they can't tell you anything, they won't tell you everything. You'll be amazed how many kids come into our office and they tell us everything, and the parents be shocked because they can't talk to them. I go teach in schools, and I mention the word. I tell kids about healthy relationships and consent. And I say, hey, we're going to talk about the three-letter word, SEX, and they giggle. And I tell them they don't want to say the word, only because there's two adults in the room, me and the teacher. And I know they've said this word before in front of everybody else. I know they have. But because they've been taught not to have real conversations in front of adults, we've taught them that they cannot have real conversations. And so when they get in front of adults, we teach them to be silent.
And silence their voice.
Yeah.
And silence their experiences.
Yeah.
So going back to trauma and experiences,
Mhm.
give me your perception of ACEs. What are ACEs?
For me, ACEs is adverse childhood experiences. Like you say, anything that a person experienced that, is very specific. They said there's 10 of them. She probably could tell you the 10 more than I can. But persons who experience some type of violence in the home, divorced person locked up, experiencing a relative who was addicted to drugs, anybody yelling, experiencing yelling in the house. But it's an adverse childhood experience, a child coming up in a domestic violent home, experiencing their parents argue, somebody who's been touched, hit, yelled at. Think about that. The Black American experience, even anybody's experience, probably seen some of that. And so somebody's been touched inappropriately. And you think about growing up in a urban area where you're afraid of being shot or bullied, gang-infested area. You have to be afraid of being hurt, that fear is with you all the time. So you stress, your brain is hyperactive. So when I was working as a law enforcement officer, everybody in that neighborhood was afraid. They didn't say anything, right? And so they would have this no snitching thing going on. So everybody in the neighborhood was traumatized, right? They didn't know it, but they were. They were afraid to come to law enforcement officer. And even when we went in to seek, help from them, they didn't want to tell us anything. Because again, they knew we were going to get the information, but they had to live there, right? And so if people knew they were going to tell us stuff, they were at risk. And so what I like to tell people is that when it comes to trauma, we have to understand what victims go through. A lot of times we do not. And a lot of times I think churches don't understand that. It's like when they get up in the pulpit and preach, and like I tell churches and pastors, this is like planting seed in concrete. You can preach your heart out. But if you can't get people to understand, the people that are sitting in your congregations, if they're hurting, they've been traumatized, they'll go right back out, and you won't understand that they didn't receive what you preached because they're hurting, right? And so I myself, I tell people, September 8, 2006, my life changed. I tell people, I started off in seminary, I never thought I'd be here, at the end of semester, one semester, my professor called me and he said, God called you outside of the church. And I got mad. I was like, well, why God didn't tell me to not get this financial aid then? God should have told me before I got all this debt. And so, I didn't pay no mind to that. And then September 8, 2006, I got in a car chase and guys jumped out with AK-47s and tried to kill me. I almost lost my life. And I said, that's it. I can't be the police no more. And I became a detective. And it was then, I walked into a room and saw a little boy walk into the room with his head on low. He walked into an interview room and said his uncle had raped him. And I'm sitting there like, whoa. And I saw the connection. As a police officer, I saw people being killed and murdered on the streets. And then I saw this little boy walk in the room and I saw the connection. I asked God, wow. Now I see the connection. This little boy who had been molested, right? He got the help that he needed. God said, I wanted you to see where it started from. You were watching the aftermath. I want to show you the beginning. And God said, this is where it needs to start being healed so you don't have to see that. I was like, whoa. And so we were struggling, putting money in the actual solution, but we were responding to the problem, right? So it's like, okay, God said, this is why I want you to work. I want you to heal children. I don't want you to keep responding to the problem.
Let me ask you a question about ACEs, children. I'm going to tie because you sparked something in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And adults with what they call wounded children or wounded child.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk to that?
So we are all wounded, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Let's just say that.
Oh,
we
yeah.
are all wounded, right? So I am clearly a clinical professional, right? But I am a human first.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that we have that really connects us all is that many of us did not have protective factors in play.
Mm-hmm.
These same protective factors are what the legal system right now kind of says are the things that cause people to reoffend, or they recidivism is up, and all these things. And so when we actually do screenings and evaluations, we check protective factors.
Yeah.
Right? And in the clinical world, we look at a few things, but Maslow has a hierarchy. And if you don't have your basic needs met, shelter, food, clothing, if you're cold, if you don't have these basic needs met, that is trauma.
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right? So I may have a sandwich today, but my heat is off.
Yeah.
Right? In today's world, these kids don't have Wi-Fi; they lose their mind.
Right.
Right?
Story.
But school is dependent on that service.
Yeah.
I've seen children go in McDonald's in the corner to do their homework because there is no Wi-Fi at home. And so that is what that looks like today. Now, do we think that's trauma? I'm in my early, not quite 50 yet, years. But my children are teenagers, and they believe that stuff is like a disparity.
Yes.
Right? They are lost. These children are fragile. They don't have a lot of resilience, and that is the truth of it.
Yes.
But I'm the parent. So I raised this fragile child thinking that I have given them the tools and all the things that they need, but the environment they live in is greater than me. It is no different from when we raised grew up as a wounded child.
Right.
So if our parents felt like, and if they weren't abused, they didn't experience that kind of abuse. They experienced other disparities.
Yes.
Right? So whether it's a food disparity, all these things. So here they are thinking they're raising us, giving us what they had and what they were taught.
Exactly.
Right? And we are having these like gaps. We have these black holes. We have sometimes they're as small as a pinhole. Sometimes sometimes they need a stitch, and sometimes they need a staple. But we all have these holes. We all have these soft spots and these deficits that we don't necessarily know how to not even report, but even process or make sense of. And that sometimes is why people feel like wounded child, or I feel like I can't even digest what's coming in because it literally fell through the hole. I don't have the net to catch it. I don't have the ability to regulate my emotions. And we're not necessarily taught the range of emotions. If you ask people how they feel, even when people come see me for the first time, I say, how you feeling? They'll say things like sad, happy, frustrated, stressed. They don't say shame, guilt. They don't say confused. They don't say those other feelings. I mean, there are a million feelings. That's why people use emojis these days. Right? I can't tell you how I feel, but I can show you bloop, 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 right? So this technology has really given us a scapegoat to not necessarily verbalize.
Right.
Tell you.
Right.
And for me, I'd rather you have something than nothing. But in the same breath, what does it do? It just helps minimize just how emotionally mature we really are.
Or I can show you in a physical way.
Absolutely.
Through acting out against someone else or against myself. Right? Through suicide or through violence.
So some of the direct, I guess more common symptoms of trauma can be suicidal behavior, can be depression, anxiety, things of that sort. But some of the other symptoms that people don't know about and or associate with that is a lot of gut issues. So this is where our
We process. Right.
emotional brain is our gut.
Right.
Or mental health.
So we turn that into, I have irritable bowels. I'm always in the bathroom. I have chronic pain. I don't know where it's coming from. Memory loss. There is a lot of things that we don't associate one with the other.
That body.
And people overuse the word anxiety all day long. That's the favorite buzzword, especially since COVID. But it's not just anxiety. Sometimes it's uncertainty. Sometimes it is insecurity. Sometimes it's I'm unfamiliar. You can walk in a room and you say, I'm anxious. No, it's just unfamiliar. Right?
And that's the thing that I tell people, because it's that relationship issue, that disconnect from yourself. And one of the things that make me unique in this space and speaking around the country and the world is my own history with trauma. At the age of 12, walking home from school, I was kidnapped and raped by a stranger and was able to get away. He almost murdered me, and I was fought and got away and never told my story to anybody until I was in my late 30s. And so one of the things that I was very familiar with ACEs. When I found out about it, I checked it, check, all 10 applied to me. And so it wasn't until then I started looking at myself like, okay, addicted to alcohol, okay, sex issues, okay, yeah, okay, okay, I was a womanizer, okay, have intimacy issues, okay, have relationship issues, all those things that I had, body issues, mental health issues. I was like, whoa, but it made sense. Now I was able to get help when I went to therapy. All those things made sense to me now. And I realized, okay, I'm not a bad person. Something bad happened to me. But it was only understanding the body-mind connection in the trauma. I became victim informed, trauma informed, like, okay, that's when the resiliency piece came in, right? It was like, okay, there's a difference between resiliency and coping. The church had taught me to cope. It hadn't taught me to be resilient.
Okay.
See, because coping made me conform to the conditions I found myself. But it helped me be resilient, become strong, to build on top of what I knew, so that I could become better at who I was and who I could become.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit. So, church,
Yeah.
what things would you now advocate for churches to do as a informed person, so that we can put that out in the air and say, okay, when I was dealing with self-image, all of these things, what would you want to hear in church?
I think
what education training would you want to see in church?
I think you said it. I think something she said, kids are different and they didn't know how to put words to their emotions. I think community and communication is the key. I think providing those spaces that, we preach all the time. We're preaching at kids, we're talking to them. But when do we listen? When do we ever get an opportunity to hear them? How do we give them space to express themselves? I teach in schools, middle kids, they're very expressive. If you give them opportunity to talk freely and without fear of judgment, they'll talk to you and they'll be honest with you, right? And so I think if you provide learning opportunities and you set it up in a judgment-free environment, right, and make space for them, learn their world. Don't try to bring them into your world. Learn their world. And I pass out sheets to them and have them write on there what they think. And it broke my heart. One kid put on there, he's an 8th grader. He said, I have no one to express my true feelings to.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sitting there reading this paper like, and I'm talking about sexual abuse and consent. And I'm sitting here, eyes getting watered like, man, this is an 8th grader telling me this, right? So, but he was being honest.
Right.
So, I think that's one way, and I just think having open opportunities for them to talk, and so that's just one way, I think, just providing opportunity for them to talk.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you the same question.
Yep, got it. So I think that going off of what you said, that many of us, kids, adults, don't feel safe to talk anywhere that we feel comes with some sort of expectation. You walk in church, you feel like you're expected to be away, show up away, get what you're supposed to get, right? And so in school, you're expected to be away. Like there are these unspoken roles or rules that come along with these structured environments sometimes. And so changing that is going to be kind of like moving a ship, right? We wish it was as fast as the wheel of a car, but it's not. And so you just got to start somewhere. Start somewhere, right? And sometimes it's really the rigid, traditional structure of things that don't like to see change, because that really does kind of tap on their own trauma, tap on their own stuff. And so it's like, no, it has to be this way. So that's one of the other problems. But there are ways to kind of help everyone in any kind of structured environment. You can literally put up the 1-800 number to sexual assault hotline in the hallway.
That's
it. Right.
You can have a drop box in the hallway up on the wall. Where people can ask questions or they can drop in messages. You can do a separate prayer line just for people with trauma. You can offer little journal tablets, right, that are guided. Guided journal tablets. Ask yourself, you don't have to just open up a book and just, where do I start? Because people get stuck with that, right? And so you can do prompted journals. You can also tell people a whole list of, in today's world, so like podcasts, Yeah,
Oh,
your
yeah.
podcast
Podcasts,
out there
yeah.
available, right? Everybody's online, so some of the digital platforms are inevitable, and the internet's a gift and a curse. So there are all these resources that people can have their fingertips to, whether it's an Instagram page, a TikTok thread, a podcast to follow, whatever that is. There's also some groups on Yahoo. In the groups, I forgot what it is, Yahoo groups. You can literally type in whatever form of trauma you've dealt with and say open platform group and write back and forth to each other in clouds.
Yeah.
So it's not judged. I don't know who's reading that.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. Now, of course, I'm going to throw this in. You can always ask a therapist, right?
Yep.
You can always call a therapist.
Yep.
You can always seek the kind of therapist you need. And the great thing about just how far therapy has come is you can filter the therapist you want,
Yep.
right? Whether they are African American, Latino, Asian, it does not matter. The gender, your insurance type, whether you don't have insurance, free therapy.
Yeah.
There are places to every community, especially in Georgia, every county has a community service board.
Yes.
With that community service board, DeKalb Community Service Board, if you are in any kind of financial distress and you don't think you can afford therapy, it is free at these community service boards.
True story.
If you are in college, you can go to your college counseling center.
Yes.
And if they don't have one, they have a sister relationship with another facility, another university that does.
Right.
So you can get therapy there. And here's one that is grossly underused. And I tell my clients to use this all the time. EAP.
Oh, yeah.
Employee
Oh,
Assistance
yeah.
Program,
Yes,
right?
yes.
If you are not employed, but your mother is,
Use
your
it.
sister who live in the same house is,
Right.
you can get that benefit absolutely free.
Yeah.
Every employer, most every employer offers some sort of paid for therapy that they will eat the cost, right? And sometimes it's 3 free sessions, but that's a great way to start.
It is.
Right.
Or some companies have, I have a client I just got and she has 20. And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, company.
Okay, company. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But people don't use that all the time. They think they have to be something drastic or, an immediate acute stress issue. No. Therapy is for maintenance. It is not always for this response to something. It is proactive. It is a tool to use to help you communicate effectively, to help you regulate your emotions, and to help you recognize, oh, I thought I was past that.
And therapy is an answer to prayer.
Listen. Listen. And they go
I'm
together.
telling you something.
And they go together.
They go together.
They
Yes.
go together.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
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 Let me.
And so that's one way the church can do is put it in their announcements, what she
Right.
said, that these things are available.
Right.
Because
Right.
if the church ain't making that available resource, people don't know.
People
And
don't
I'm going
know.
to give you that.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you all of that. So I want you to have that.
Yeah.
Have you a list. Have you some things out there. You can put it on the website as well.
Right.
I'll have all those things sent to you.
Right.
But here's another great thing. You can connect with your local therapist or someone you know, right?
Right.
And you ask your church, like, hey, we should offer a group.
Yes.
Hey, we should maybe look at our budget and see if we can account for 10 free sessions, like an EAP service through the church.
Right.
Or hey, maybe we should think of a list or a roster of individuals that would give sliding scale fees
Right.
for individuals because inflation high, right? Bread
Right.
is $5, so everybody's not looking at.
Right.
You already have some sort of challenges with how you're digesting what the world is going through because everybody's inflation right now. Nobody's exempt. Like that's where we are.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's still this huge barrier between accepting therapy, recognizing that it is valuable,
Right.
and the stereotype that comes along with being in therapy.
Yeah.
So
Right.
people don't always want to say, I'm in therapy.
Yeah.
I
Right.
have a therapist.
Right.
I'd rather say, I prayed and I'm waiting. I'm waiting on God.
Waiting on God. Right.
But faith
Yeah.
without work is what?
Dead.
Oh.
And you can use scripture to back that up. Because Jesus asked.
Right.
Jesus, you look when Jesus healed people, he asked, what would you have me to do for you?
Right. Yes.
Okay?
Right.
It's not Jesus ain't walking up to people slapping them on the head. He asking.
He asking.
Right?
Right. Right. And part of that healing is therapeuo.
It is.
One of the Greek words is therapeuo.
He asked the man
Therapy.
at the pool.
Right.
How long?
Right.
He's asking questions.
Right.
What can I do for you?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Those are some
Jesus
great
is
ways.
not guessing.
Yeah.
He's not guessing what's wrong with you.
Right.
He's asking you.
He's asking you. Right. How long has this been happening?
Yes.
What is better for me to do to heal this man?
Uh-huh.
Right?
Right.
Forgive him of his sins.
Right. Right. Let me ask you this. So when you talk about being traumatized and being and having these different ways of coping, you mentioned briefly about intimacy with people. Well, how did the trauma inform the way that you interacted with people?
First of all, it affected how I interacted with God.
Okay. Right.
Let me take the gloves off for a minute. Okay? Because trauma affects people in many ways, in different ways. First of all, God created us to be social. Okay?
Social. God created us to
Be social beings.
in isolation.
No, not in isolation. God created us to be social
I'm
beings.
being funny because a lot of us, I'm just gonna be by myself. I'm gonna deal with this myself.
This is why people always say, well, people don't come to church because they don't believe in God. No, that's not true.
Right.
People, when people have been hurt,
Mm-hmm.
traumatized in some form of way, they become very, very, very hesitant to trust
Mm-hmm.
not just other people but themselves.
Okay.
Right. So I gave up on God because my question was, the first thing I learned in church was God, Jesus loved me. Yes, I know. How do I know? Because the Bible tells me.
Right.
So as a kid, why would Jesus let that happen to me?
Mm-hmm.
Why would Jesus let me watch my mom get beat
Mm-hmm.
every single day?
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would God let that happen? So going back to, if the devil wants to just hinder God,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why not destroy children?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it takes God longer to fix an adult than it does, right, to influence a child. And so the system that we're in, you find out that consumerism, scientists have found out, people have said, if you want to control a person's mind and make them buy stuff, make them into a victim. Because a victim who doesn't like themselves they're more apt to buy things to make themselves feel better about themselves. Because you separate them. You make them feel separate. I mean, look at America now. Everybody's separated. Right? And so when people are hurt and they feel traumatized, they don't like to get together. They distrust each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was traumatized, I didn't trust anybody. Yeah, I would date, get married, got divorced, but I objectified people. I didn't let anybody close to me. Right? I was sitting in church. Yeah, I was raising my hand, praise, but I didn't trust God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was preaching in pulpits.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
You know, I was good at what I did, but I didn't really trust God.
Right.
Right? I didn't believe God.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I didn't trust God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I had intimacy issues.
Mm-hmm.
Because I still couldn't get past the fact that God would let something like that happen to me. Right? And so what happened was I had to get to the point. It was when God said, son, that man tried to murder you.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't so I could see that God said, I saved your life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you looked at the trajectory of your life, right, you couldn't have planned your life the way I planned your life. What he tried to bury, I planted.
Mm-hmm.
Most people would have been killed in that situation. I pulled you out of that, and I put you in a profession so you could see. And then I made you a detective so you can see and investigate these cases, so you can see it from a perspective no one else can see it from. And so I planted you in this profession so that you can speak on this like nobody else could.
Right.
It was then that I saw, wait a minute, God plucked me out, and I was able to see that. That's when it flipped.
Right.
Like, son, you were called for this.
Right.
So it happened for a reason and a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when the relationship clicked.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, my relationship couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But now I can go back in and tell somebody else who was abused.
Right.
Right. That God still loves them.
Right. So you had to do the self work. You had to love yourself first.
Yeah. I had to reconnect with the little boy inside of me.
Right.
Because when I went in that room and saw that little boy,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw him get resurrected, because that's what I witnessed. He walked in with his head hung low, his shoulder was slumped. And when I saw him talk to that therapist, it was different.
Okay.
He didn't talk. He didn't talk to like police officers trained me.
Mhm.
Police officers talk to people like this, real confrontational. They ask who, what, when, where, why. They didn't care about the victim. They
Mhm.
just wanted answers.
Right.
The therapist came in. They asked the little boy, "You can sit where you want to sit." They gave him his power back.
Mhm.
Right? They gave him a choice.
Right.
And then they sat beside him, not in front of him.
Mhm.
Gave him a choice if he wanted to look at them or not. Right?
Mhm.
It was all about giving him his power back.
Mhm.
Right? And that little boy sat there.
Mhm.
And they just talked about him, what he liked to do. They was more concerned about him than what happened to him. And he came alive.
Right.
He was in control of his own story.
Right.
And I'm sitting there and I'm crying.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my God, for the first time in years, I felt something.
Mm.
And I hadn't felt anything in years.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there for the first time I had an emotion.
Wow.
I never forget.
Mm.
And that when Dr. Johnson invited Dr. Kohler to the church to preach.
Yeah. I remember.
And I remember the message he had.
Mm.
His message was, "You are not God."
Mhm.
And I'm sitting in the congregation like, wow.
Yeah.
And I went to therapy the next week.
Oh wow. Yeah.
That's how God called.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
That's how I got reconnected.
Going back to again, a question about intimacy. How important is intimacy in our lives as people? How important is intimacy?
Well, we can infancy, right?
Yeah.
The human touch is vital
Mm-hmm.
to our existence.
Mm-hmm.
We thrive
Mm-hmm.
off of being connected, being cared for,
Mhm.
being hugged,
Mhm.
being close to. And for those people who even have the largest intimacy issues, every now and then they still want to be in the room with,
Mhm.
right? I don't have to sit under you, but just
Yeah.
knowing that you over there or
Yeah.
you upstairs in the house with me,
Yeah.
it feels like whatever connection I can grab in my capacity at the time,
Mhm.
right? So when people say things like, "Oh, they're too clingy,"
Mhm.
I say they have a healthy expression of
Yeah.
that's okay. They
Yeah.
haven't been tampered with in that way. There hasn't
Mhm.
been tainted in that
Yeah,
space.
yeah.
Maybe another space. Maybe I won't tell you all my secrets.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I still like to hold hands,
Yeah.
right? So intimacy is important. And when I see those challenges that come in, whether it's in therapy, whether it's in through family or friends, I instantly know that somewhere you did not receive whatever the seed is you needed to grow whatever it is that's absent, right?
Mhm.
And if you did receive it, sometimes people cut your stem too fast, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you didn't get the bloom in that area.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's whatever it comes from, but ways to get that back,
Mhm.
right? Oftentimes when people have been victims of sexual trauma, the first person who touched them, that just shifted it right then, right?
Yep.
So they don't register or connect that kind of touch
Mhm.
with something that's supposed to feel okay or feel safe or feel good. So it's literally like that's a negative experience. That's now I'm averse to that. I'm opposed to that. And so I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
Right. And so although your body may clamp up, you can get really tense. There are sex therapists that can help with that, all the way to pelvic floor therapy for women. That's a real thing. Or some men go see urologists. All of those things make a connection because our relationship with that, our experience with that was never replaced with newer, healthier, safer experiences. And that's essentially when people start to revisit, let me go ahead and dig up this old root. I'm still watering this old plant that no longer serves me.
Mhm.
Literally, I've created a garden of
Mhm.
old things that are dead with dead roots. I need to uplift that,
Yeah.
dig that out, start anew,
Yeah.
turn the soil,
Yeah.
right? Till it a little bit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so when you do that, you will have new experiences with safe people because not only am I doing that physically, but I'm a vet out.
Mhm.
Who
Oh, yeah.
else is I'm gonna let in
Yeah.
my garden?
Exactly.
Right? You have discernment.
Yeah.
Everybody has a little bit of that. We can read the room.
Oh yeah.
Right? We can feel when someone has our best interest at heart. We can almost feel when you grab the right partner in life, you can just,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? And you
Yeah.
can relax.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You don't have to nearly be as defensive. You don't have to be on all the time.
Yeah.
You have someone who has your back. You have a partner. So oftentimes, and not just romantic relationships, for children, they know when they
yeah.
have a nurturing spot. Maybe they don't have it at home. Maybe it's an older sibling. Maybe it's not a parent. Maybe it's a teacher. Maybe it's a pastor. Whatever it is, they can literally, and when they realize that, they will start to bloom
Mhm.
in different areas. It
Mhm.
might be a social group.
Mhm.
When I worked in the prison, one of my best favorite, when I say this job was invaluable. Worked at a prison for many years, did do a lot of clinical work. I would see these pseudo families that people would have in prison.
Yeah.
That's my mama, my sister, my cousin, right? Everybody, they even had a dad.
Yeah.
Right? So whether it was an all women's prison or all men prison, it didn't matter. People need people.
True.
We are going to gravitate. We're going to take care of each other. We're gonna split this commissary. We're going to do, you do laundry, I do this. We're going to pray together. We're going to look out for each other. We did that. And when COVID happened, it was such a split, right? And it was an involuntary, abrupt, powerless shift. It was trauma, right? Shutting the world off. Could you imagine being in a home alone?
Right.
Shutting the world off, and your highlight of your week was going to Piccadilly or going to Walmart to see other people.
Yeah.
Right.
And now it's like, So you on the front porch waiting for some sort of connection?
Right.
Anything? The level of desperation we have,
Yes.
even today,
yeah.
we back outside and we overreach it now.
Oh yeah.
Right? We're going to get all that back.
Right.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
Right.
Because intimacy is invaluable.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know what I think about intimacy? The ability to listen. When I wasn't able to be intimate, I couldn't hear you. I was so busy wondering what you thought about me. I was so defensive. I couldn't remember your name. You'd be talking to me. And I couldn't wait till you finished till I said what I had to say. Because I was wondering what you would think about me. Now think about that in the context of God. You preaching. I'm your amen and all day long. I can't hear anything you say. I can't hear God. Right? Because I'm so busy thinking I'm unworthy. I'm thinking about how shameful I am about things that I've done. I can't hear. So I can't listen to you. I can't even hear your pain because I'm so worried about how I feel. So I'm not even available to you.
Okay.
So think about me being in a relationship with another person. They may be hurting. I can't feel that because I'm too worried about you should be feeling my pain.
Right. Right. Right.
So that's what I mean by intimacy.
Okay.
So I became a womanizer. I couldn't even be friends with a woman without trying to have sex with her. Right? I didn't even see her as a person.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I was objectifying everybody. And so God couldn't use me in certain spaces.
Right.
Because God said, I'm trying to use you to heal people and you trying to use me.
Right. Use them. Right.
You know what I'm saying? So God said, I got to sit you down.
Right.
I got to heal you, boy. I got to pull you back.
Right.
Here I am thinking God punished me. No, God,
Right.
boy, I'm healing you.
Right.
You
Peeling
know
off
what I'm
the
saying?
layers.
So it's
Right.
like, you like healing hurts in the beginning.
Right.
If you don't know what it feels like.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And like she said, you have to know not only just how to listen, but who to listen to. All therapists are not created equal.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You have to pray for God to send you healing.
Right.
And send that therapist.
Right.
You know, like she said, you could be so hungry for it, you'll just gravitate to anybody.
Objectification. Objectification, trauma, the church pastor. Your thoughts. Do church pastors objectify members?
I think that's possible. It depends. If you're talking to the church pastor, it's a different question. I think it's subjective. I think it can happen.
It can't happen.
Yeah, I think it can. I think particularly you talk about the church pastor, like she said, we're human. We are wounded in some form or fashion. If the church pastor has some hidden trauma, like I said, we all have that. I think everybody needs some culture therapy in some form or fashion to deal with their own inner traumas.
Right. So what if a church pastor had some hidden trauma and is dealing with it, and in the congregation, what should we be looking at or looking for when we're talking about recognizing trauma inside of the church? And I want to put in that mandate reporter piece. What should we be looking at?
Let me just say this, because this is on the tip of my tongue. Right. So you said it when you said hidden. Right. So if the pastor is dealing with hidden, if the teacher is dealing with hidden, if whomever is in this space of authority in this space of professionalism, expertise, if that stuff is hidden, not shared, not exposed, what would you know to look for? Right? Because these things are not on your chest.
Nope.
Like, you don't have a sign on your back, or you don't walk in. If the professional, if the expertise, if the person in authority is getting help, right? They can win while they wounded.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, but one thing that will happen sometimes, not all the time, is that countertransference is real.
Yeah.
Countertransference is real.
If a client walks in to see me and they give me too much of a familiar space, and I'm like, oh, she sounds like my cousin such and such that right? Let me refer you
Yeah.
Right.
somewhere else. Let
Yeah.
me give you to someone else who can absolutely see and hear everything you're saying, because I can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that is
It's already
resonating
happening.
with.
It's countertransference.
Yeah.
Right.
So a pastor could look out to the congregation and look at somebody and just, get this
Yeah.
thing and focus on that one person for months,
Yeah.
not recognizing where it's coming from. Sometimes that's countertransference.
Yeah.
But if you don't know it,
Right. Or something that happened in the past.
it's tapping somewhere.
It's
right?
tapping.
It's literally leaning
That
on
discernment.
memory.
Right. Right.
Sometimes it's like literally connected to an old memory. Sometimes that stuff does not even come up
Right.
until
Right.
in that moment.
Right.
So those types of things are inevitable, and it's really the responsibility of the professional, the expert, or whomever else,
Or the mature person in the room.
is literally to address that.
Right.
Sometimes, like I said, a therapist has to refer the person out. Sometimes the detective will have to excuse himself from a case.
Yeah.
Sometimes the pastor got to sit down. Sometimes that's exactly what a part of our oath, our license, our responsibility to have some level of integrity in the field really matters.
Right.
That's when it really matters, because who knows that? You can walk in an emergency room, you can walk to a physical with a new doctor who's supposed to be a specialist, and they tell you stuff and you're supposed to just take it as face value. They can tell you that you are okay and go home with this ibuprofen, and you go home and literally be deathly ill.
Yeah.
But you took the word because they're the doctor.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're going to seek.
Yeah.
Right.
An expert, right?
Yeah.
That's where integrity and all those things really play a matter. But
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
who dictates that?
Yeah. And that's very important, particularly when it comes to mandated reporting. You put safeguards in place, particularly when it comes to mandated reporting. Georgia does have a mandated reporting law. People always ask me, well, who should report? I always tell them everybody. Just to be safe, everybody. In particular, if there's any form of leadership in your church, anything happen on church grounds, any activity the church puts on, you want to report it. Okay. So I just tell them everybody. Definitely everybody. But to answer your question, like she said, it's hard. Have systems in place. Like before I came over here in my presentation, I did a sexual offender registry, 5 mile radius of. I don't know if you know it. You got like 5 sexual offenders in the 5 mile radius of this church, right? So, but that's just something you do. As a detective, that's the first thing I do when I do an investigation of a church. I go in. I'm gonna ask you, did you do that? If the person in your church, doesn't mean that they can be given a chance to come to your church. They just don't need to be in a leadership position involving children. Right? It's something that I'm going to do as an investigator. Did you do this? Did you do a safety background check? It is unlock a key. Who is your go-to person? Do you have a liaison? Do you have a system like, that the report taker, the witness? Do they go to a report taker? Who's your report taker? And who is the liaison? The liaison reports to the pastor to the bishop. Everybody doesn't need to know the business of the person who's been victimized, right? Trying to protect the victim as much as possible. The report taker knows you don't ask, you're not doing an investigation, you're just getting pertinent information. The liaison is the one who's setting up the police report, talk to the police, talk to reporters, whoever needs to know on the need-to-know basis, right? The liaison and the pastor, she's relaying information to the pastor, you protecting the pastor from the media or whatever. So have something like that. So, you're an institution, you're an organization.
Right.
You want to be professional as possible.
Right.
And so whatever you do, have on a lock and key. If you run the background checks, if you're doing your sexual offender registry, have that on a lock and key, double lock and key. You don't want that information accessible to anybody. And But like you said, you yourself, you know yourself better than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the leader, you know you have certain proclivities. You know what you're attracted to. You know what your weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
Don't fool yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, I knew what mine were. You know, I traveled the country all the way. You know what I do now? My wife travels with me.
Yeah.
You know, before then, I used to get off the stage when I speak to law artisans. Females used to come up to me, let us buy you a drink. We in Georgia. No, I'm going to my room, whatever. You know, now my wife goes with me. That cut all that out.
Mm-hmm.
I introduce her from the stage.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
you want to buy me a drink, you got to deal with her. Right? You know, it ain't happening, right? But you know, like say you're human,
Right.
right?
Right.
Devil business.
Right.
You know, you put yourself in situations. So
You said protect the victim. How important is that?
that's very important.
Right.
We do not live in a victim-friendly culture. Okay. When this R. Kelly thing came out, people were all over victims. Even now with this Puff Daddy thing, they are assaulting these victims. Why didn't they tell them? People don't understand victims of sexual assault. Why they don't come forward immediately? Okay. Victims don't report sexual assault for a variety of reasons. One, a lot of victims don't know they've been assaulted when they've been assaulted. Right? They don't understand what is happening at the time. Okay. People don't understand consent, and particularly when you start dealing with powerful men, people in powerful places who are doing things. And then they're in that culture where they think it's okay to treat women like this. I mean, when you start dealing with this culture, you start dealing with these lyrics. You start dealing with this culture, these lyrics, and this how they think about women and things of that nature. And so it's hard. And then sometimes law enforcement treat them bad. Let's be honest. You know, law enforcement think they don't have a case. They tell the victim, don't drop the case. Or like she said, they tell a family member, they get dismissed. You know, or you go through this whole process of telling your case, because you got to remember, the suspect doesn't have to testify.
The victim has to prove.
The burden of proof is on the victim.
Right.
Suspect doesn't have to prove anything. So you got to remember, if I tell you to get up in front of a bunch of strangers and tell me your last consensual sexual experience, and don't leave out any detail, tell us everything you did in the bedroom, drive to your own home, in a bunch of strangers, would you be willing to do that? Most people wouldn't. But that's what you're asking a victim to do. More than once, probably. I mean, that's what we asking victims to do.
Right.
You know, another challenge with that is when you are a victim of sexual assault, but you work in the sex industry,
Oh yeah.
who's listening to you? Right? People think you invite that, male or female.
Yeah.
Right.
When you want to report a sexual assault, but it's your babysitter, and you're the boy, and the babysitter's a teenage girl,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When you want to report a sexual assault, but you're this 6'5", 300-pound man who says this groupie came in your room, or this a coworker did such and such in your office, if you tell your friends that, they're like, bro, what happened?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Right.
Right. So there is this societal belief that you should be all right with that.
Yeah.
Right? That's not really assault. Right? Just don't put yourself in that. Don't you put yourself in that position again.
If your skin is a certain color,
Absolutely.
let's be real. You know, sexual assault applies to different people in different ways. You know, so we don't live in a victim-friendly culture, and like I said, the burden of proof is on the victim to prove it. And just by the very nature of the sexual assault, most victims are traumatized to the point they don't report it immediately. Now, as a sexual assault detective, our average victim probably didn't report to probably a month, couple weeks to a month later, when all the evidence, physical evidence, was gone. Right? They had to really think about what just happened. Right? And so rarely did I get a victim, unless it was a serial rapist or stranger on stranger rape, did they report immediately. But most rapes, 93% of rapes, ages 12 to 34, are acquaintance rapes, people that they know. So they're shocked. They're in shock. Like, I can't believe this person who I knew raped me. So, you know, and it's just sad that we live in that type of culture. So, you know, it's hard for victims. So again, coming forward, you know, particularly against somebody you know, and particularly somebody powerful, you know, they already telling you you're not gonna be believed. You don't want to destroy the person's reputation. Now let's flip to the church. A powerful pastor, you know, who has a reputation, who has a position, that's really gonna be hard. You know, so that's gonna be hard. So it's hard to really bring those cases forward. So a lot of victims don't even bother doing it. Yeah. And imagine that's just female. Imagine males.
Males, right?
Because males are raped too.
Right. And we look at that with
Yeah.
the Catholic Church.
Oh yeah. Oh definitely.
That
Definitely.
whole
Even the Boy Scouts.
right.
I was going to say sports
Yeah,
teams,
sports teams.
clubs,
Oh, yeah.
all those kinds
And
of
you
things.
think about it, more is being done to protect the institution than the victim.
Right.
Right. So you think about all these lawsuits.
Right.
And then you think about the politicians that protect the institution.
The institutions, right?
Yeah. So it's so when you start talking about victims and you start talking about sexual assault and sexual trauma, you have a lot going on.
Yeah. Okay. Anything you want to say about that? With objectification and intimacy, how can we do some practical things? What practical things can we do to minimize objectification and develop intimacy as individuals?
As individuals.
As individuals.
Find a safe space to do it in. Find a safe person to practice with. Hug yourself. Sometimes you have to get refamiliarized with your own body, right? Whether it is looking in the mirror, whether it is treating yourself to self-care, whether it is getting safe massages, whether it is doing a lot of skincare, whether it is getting a weighted blanket, feeling hugs, whether it is doing a few therapeutic tips like dealing with a lot of sensory overload. You can literally run your hand under really warm or really cold water. It tricks the mind to respond differently. You can hold a piece of ice until it melts. You can get a rubber band and pop it on your wrist. You can get a toasty space to be in. Again, weighted blankets are great. They are all the rage these days.
Yeah.
You can, back in the day, our family, we didn't have a weighted blanket. And we did not have diffusers. Everybody got diffusers these days.
Yeah,
Essential oils in them.
Yeah.
But what we did have was a pot of water on the stove, right? So put your little clove or cinnamon in it, cut you an orange or a lemon, and let that thing boil through the house.
Yeah.
Don't put
You
little
had
things in
grandma's
it.
quilt,
You had grandma cover. Grandma cover was a weighted blanket. That thing was heavy
Sure
because
was.
they made it.
Right.
So that was a
That was the
weighted blanket,
original.
right?
Yeah.
Weighted
That's
blanket.
essentially why when people cuddle, they will literally put their feet under
Yeah.
someone else.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Right.
the sensory that we
Yeah.
like.
Right.
We need
Yeah.
it. And so those are really small practical things
Okay.
that people can do
Yeah.
on their own. No cost, not dependent on many other people to do it.
Right.
But another way that we can kind of help ourselves with objectifying things, because we're all guilty of that. We can look at someone and say, if we think that they are homeless, rich, well taken care of, like we
Yeah.
have all these,
Yeah.
preconceived notions.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's so tricky because the person that's homeless today don't look like the person that was homeless 20 years ago. They look like me. Right? So
Right,
they,
right.
they get dressed to go live in their van.
Yeah.
But we already judge so much
Yep.
just off of the sheer one glimpse.
Yep.
We have to check ourselves with that.
That-
We're so judgmental
Yeah.
that we have to really check. Why is that so important to know what someone's story is just off? What do you plan on offering this person? Nothing. So we do a little more self-inventory of our own mess.
Yeah.
We don't have to pass it on to other people.
That's
That's
true.
why we objectify so
Yeah.
fast.
That's
We should
true.
really try to figure out their stuff.
Yeah.
Clean up y'all.
Yeah. That's true. That's true story. That's true story.
Sweep around your own front door.
Listen.
Yeah. I'm telling you. That's
Try
true
to sweep
story.
around mine.
Yeah. That's true story. Yeah. Definitely.
Well, I appreciate y'all as we wrap up this conversation. It has been rich. A lot of things has popped in. Thank you for the resources. I'm going to say it in advance. Thank you for the things that we're going to have out front. And you're giving me ideas on how to give information, give the resources that we need to be a better community partner. I mean, brother, I appreciate you. Before we leave, anything else as a former detective that we need to think about? And I didn't even think about the sexual, what you call them? The folks who have cases on them in the radius of the church. I never
The sex offenders.
the sex
in the
offenders.
area.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Anything else as a detective that we need to think about?
Yeah, that's one of them. You just keep it in your office, and when you do it, it'll just pop up with the pictures. Like I said, just keep those things in the office. Like I said, just making sure you don't put anybody like that in leadership over children. Like that's just for you and your leadership team to make sure, just for your safety, and just advise your leadership team. Develop some type of system who reports. Like I said, everybody doesn't need to know if something happens. That way you're protecting your victim. And do trainings, do periodic trainings of your leadership team, about, what happens. Familiarize yourself with the laws, child molestation, what it is.
Should we keep something inside of the church with the law or in a manual or something?
I would say you can. You can even, have rules, train your staff on,
Right.
nobody be alone with a child unattended, so we don't do that, just that way. If I come in as a detective, first thing I'm gonna ask, do you have any known rules throughout your congregation? No one wants to be alone with a child except for a parent.
Right.
If that's a rule that's known through all the congregants, and then I come in and the person is accused of something, and they were found to be alone with a child, and you said we train all our congregants, particular members, that they're not to be alone with a child, particularly the last child, then I know if they had intention. They broke that rule that they should have known, particularly as a member.
Right.
Posted somewhere on a billboard or something like that. No children, under 10,
Right.
Areas outside the congregation alone without a parent. Just little things like that. That way people know you're serious about your children.
Right.
And things like that. So just small things like that to kind of protect yourself, protect your children, and to let the children know they're not to wander off.
Okay.
Because there are people in the area,
Right.
don't wander off from church grounds.
Right.
If you're gonna go outside, go with an adult.
Right.
As a parent, just small things like that to keep them
Okay.
safe and kind of keep them, mindful of their own safety. Things like that. So it's the world we live in, unfortunately.
Right. Right. And you said to have conversations with allowing young people to talk.
Yeah, just have a kind of a community, and just it doesn't have to be where you're talking about trauma. Say you don't have to scare them. Just say, hey, young people, we're gonna have a conversation about internet safety. Fourth night, what games y'all playing? What apps was, and they'll just tell you. Have you ever got a message on Instagram or picture from a person you didn't know? And I've had kids tell me, they dating somebody on fourth night that they never met.
Oh wow. Okay.
So you kind of make them aware of human trafficking and stuff like that. They'll kind of get it. You talk about consent. What consent is, healthy relationships. Things of that nature. And then you can talk about, some of the laws, touching, inappropriate touching, how they can get in trouble for that. And so,
I hate to say it.
Yeah.
What is the law on sending pictures?
Sexting, yeah, that's a big one. Sexting is a federal crime.
That's a federal crime.
Federal crime. Anybody under the age of 18 is sending somebody a nude picture can get up to 20 years. Now you can be charged. One picture can get you 4 different charges. Okay, if a person asks for a picture,
Even if it's a minor.
under 18,
Right.
even if they ask for a picture, if someone asks a minor for a picture under 18, that's soliciting for child pornography just by asking. That's all they have to do is ask for somebody under 18. Somebody send somebody a question, can I get a nude? Just for asking, that's soliciting for child pornography.
Okay, so what if I'm 16 and the person is same age? Is it the same offense?
Yeah, both of them. Yeah,
Okay.
that's soliciting for child pornography. You got to be 18.
Okay.
It's a federal crime. And if the person takes the picture, they get charged with manufacturing
Okay.
child pornography. And if they send it, they get charged for manufacturing and distributing child pornography. So that's 2 federal charges. And so now if they take it and send it, they get 3 federal charges. Because now they manufacture, they possess it, and they distribute it. And then the person who gets the picture, now they get charged with 3 federal crimes.
Right.
Right? Because now they possess it,
Mm-hmm.
they solicit it,
Mhm.
right? And if they show somebody, right, they distribute it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
just one picture
Right.
can get them up to 60 years in prison.
Right. Right. And most teenagers now are oblivious.
They don't know it. And
So
here's
that's
the
part
other
of the
thing about
culture.
sexting.
Right.
There's no such thing as delete.
Mhm.
Delete means you can't see it.
Right.
Doesn't mean I can't see it.
Right.
Right? There have been people who've been witnesses to other crimes and say, "Oh, detective, I saw that robbery."
Mhm.
Okay, let us see your phone. You're a good Samaritan. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Give us their phone so we can see the robbery. Thought they deleted those pictures, and guess what? It's on that phone, that picture.
Mhm.
Guess what? Thank you so much for being a good Samaritan, but now you're going to jail.
Mhm.
Nothing's ever deleted.
Mhm. Mhm.
Your phone, it's like a Social Security.
Yeah, that's what that
Once
is.
you
It's
take
always-
it, it's there.
Yeah.
I don't even need your phone. All I got to do is get a phone company, a subpoena,
Cloud.
give me your phone number. Everything you ever done on that phone, I get.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. The government's smart. They use you to pay your bill to spy on you. Yep. That TV, phone you got.
It's
Yeah.
a spy. It's a spy.
Yeah. You just pay the government to spy on you.
That's a whole nother
Yeah, that's a whole
Yeah.
conversation. I'm going to close this out. Thank you for this conversation, and we'll do something else.
Yeah.
Real soon.
No
Good.
problem. Thank you.
All right.